All right, everybody. We are back again for another episode of the Coach's Compass. It's season number 3. Don't know what episode it is. We just continue to record, continue to bring on cool guests from all across the world. Now, remember, hit that like, subscribe, comment button down below so you continue to have this thing grow. Continue to bring on cool guests from all across the world. But I got a special guest with me today. I got Coach Pat Lewis. He's the director of basketball performance at UNC Charlotte. He's also a pro sports performance coach for the NBA and NFL players and former baseball player at the University of Florida. Coach, thank you and welcome to the Coach's Compass.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you having me on, man. Looking
Of
forward
course,
to it.
man. I mean, a former Niner, got to bring on a Niner on here, man. It's my first time bringing on a coach from my old school, man. What got you to where you are now, man? Like, what was the journey like for you?
Yeah, so I think it probably starts like back in high school with my dad. So, kind of growing up, he was really, really into weightlifting. He was like a power lifter when he was in the Army. And so he kind of got me into training really early. And then, going to the University of Florida, kind of being like really like under recruited, like kind of more, baseball doesn't have like those walk-on roles, but definitely I was not a guy at the University of Florida that was putting up numbers. Let's be very clear as a player. And so, kind of realizing like how hard I had to work and kind of, how much effort, that I had to put in just to kind of get to that level, really kind of made me go down the training role. And so, the strength and conditioning role. And so kind of got connected into that. And then our head coach at the University of Florida, Kevin O'Sullivan, he knew our basketball strength coach at Florida, Preston Green, because they were together at Clemson like in the 90s. And so they kind of got me connected. And then I did an internship year there with the basketball team. And then I got brought on for 2 years as our assistant strength coach with men's basketball, and then went to Jacksonville for 2.5 years. And then I'm in year 2 now at Charlotte. So that was kind of just the progression there. But ultimately it just came down from being an athlete that just wasn't quite good enough. And so, the training and the strength and conditioning and things like that was something I had to, high affinity to, because I knew this was like, something that could be a difference maker for me.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of us that get into this sector of, strength and conditioning is like, we weren't good enough. Like we didn't have that it factor like that some of these freak athletes have. And like now we're trying to, help other athletes be better than what we ever were. You know what I mean? Like I'm hearing it from a lot of strength coaches. I even say it for myself. Like I was in lucky spots and lucky times. But what is it like, nowadays in the college sector and kind of some of like the nitty gritty that people don't even like kind of warn you about when you first get into? Because I think a lot of people glamorize being a strength and conditioning coach. Like it all seems great and it seems like a fun time. Like you see that the guys higher up like getting into those positions, but they don't always talk about all the hours it takes to actually get into a role or who you need to know to be in those positions.
Yeah, for sure. I think, first you have to start that, this job is a privilege. You're really, really replaceable. If coach wanted to get rid of me right now, there'd probably be 300 to 400 applicants that are qualified that have their CSCS the next day, right? And like that's just kind of the way this field is. There's only X amount of Division I teams. It's not really changing. And there's more and more strength coaches each year that, want these positions that, have those type of qualifications and experience that kind of warrant, this type of experience. So what you'll kind of see is what's really good for our field is that, coaches are going to become more and more educated and more certified. They're going to become better at their craft because there are so many people, right, that really want this profession. But ultimately, some things that, they don't talk about is, there's a lot of things, we used to have a joke is like, hey, that wasn't on the CSCS, right? Most things I do from a day-to-day operation, they're not on the CSCS.
Hell no.
And so, yeah, they could be things, talking with my coaches, right? How to communicate with players. Ultimately, like you were given a lot of complex problems. And then my goal every day is just this is our simple solution of like how we're going to attack it and approach it, right? So, things regarding like, sleep, hydration, nutrition, all of our training, our travel, our recovery, things like that. I think, ultimately it just comes down to having a great relationship with each player, being able to communicate effectively with people around you. And then, ultimately, understanding and knowing that, you have the science and the knowledge and this is what we need to do, but then just kind of coming to like, all right, well, ideally at this time, like this is what we can get done. And so I think, there's a lot of coaches that just can't convey that. And you look at the coaches that are the most successful in this field, a lot of times they might not be like the smartest, but they are really, really great communicators with, the staff and the people around them.
Yeah, of course. I mean, all the great ones are really just kind of building good teams and being able to communicate across the board. What are some changes you've seen over the years within the performance and strength and conditioning space that have, helped this thing head in the right direction? That you've kind of seen maybe through Instagram or through the jobs that you've had or talking to other coaches that you kind of see like, hey, strength and conditioning is actually heading in the right way.
Yeah, I think a few things that that are good starting points would be like kind of some use with our technology, some evidence-based practice, right? And then I think there's also the flip side of that where some coaches rely on that too much up front, and like
Yeah.
they can't coach themselves. They can't coach their team to execute their warm up properly, right? So I think like there's two sides to that coin. But things that in our profession that let us know that we're moving in the right way is from a standpoint could be the changes in salaries that you see. So you see more of these positions being valued, right? You see the roles added. Like we've added roles at when I was at Jacksonville and when I was here at Charlotte, we've added more strength coaches to our department. So that like this is kind of getting more valued in that way. And then, you kind of see it as well where teams value that role more in regards to decision making with, practice volume, things like that. So those are some like positive things that, the strength and conditioning coach or the performance coach can bring value to. But I think ultimately what we need to see is we need to see a reduction in injury, right? I think like, we talk about the spike of injury, whether that's in the NBA, NFL, whatever, we need to see a reduction in that from the implementation of all this stuff. And then obviously you see like the performance metrics, those are going up and those are being broken every day, right? There's a new record every day in it could be in swimming, track, whatever. It could be, vertical in the 40-yard dash of the combine. Every year there's, really high human feet that's getting broken. So, we are pushing performance in that way. But we do need to see that kind of on the back end. We need to see the reduction in injuries that in a lot of ways.
How do we do that though? How do we reduce, 'cause, I mean, everyone loves to say injury prevention but it's sport, you know what I mean? Like it's most of the time, like it's bound to happen, but like, how do we reduce these injuries that are happening? These ACLs, these ankles, like all these things that we're seeing over these in NBA, NFL, even for the women's sports, you got soccer and all that stuff. What are some protocols that you're kind of putting in for your athletes?
Yeah. So, proper strength and conditioning, proper training that's periodized and is executed at a really high level. That's the most important thing that I can do. I think things that are really huge in the basketball place that people don't talk about a lot is getting the guys to the right playing weight. I think a lot of guys play too heavy, and so I think being able to have those conversations with your players of like, hey, we do need to get down, and then kind of being able to get the guys on the same page in that way and getting them bought in is huge. Sleep is one of the biggest things, man. And, like everyone says like, oh, sleep. But if you just look at like the introduction of the smartphone, and if you look at the introduction of, these big spikes in injury, they're correlated. And so, just getting your guys disciplined, at 10 o'clock at night to put their phone down and to actually go to bed is really huge. I think things are that simple. And then, in addition to that, we start looking at our nutrition and our diet. I might be a conspiracy theorist, but the quality of our food when it comes to the micronutrients and the seed oils and things like that, man, it really is there. Like the evidence is there and it's going to continue to come out. Like I read a paper earlier this week on how seed oils change our, basal metabolic rate, and they make us, they slow down our metabolism. So I'm like, in a few years, there might be some papers that come out that say, it weakens our tendons and ligaments as well. But I think like just ultimately getting a diet that has really high quality nutrients, really focusing on the micronutrients, raising our caloric deficiencies and making sure that, we are getting the proper macronutrients as well, making sure that we're sleeping, getting into our strength training, things like that, a lot of our soft tissue work, staying on top of it, and then ultimately periodizing your practice volume. I think, when we've implemented that here, you've just seen like a great increase in player availability because, we aren't, things I've been part of in the past. When you go like 4 or 5 hours a day, it is hard to be available every day.
I don't think you're conspiracy theorists. I think a lot of people are coming to the light and kind of seeing like what's been going on in our food systems. It hasn't been, great for us. There's a lot of change. I mean, people are going to more farm-based food, more grass-fed, stuff. So I think things are changing in the right direction. The hard part though is I would love to hear how you're getting like your athletes to buy into turning the phones off at 10 o'clock. Now I know for myself, I can't even make it past like 8:30, 9 o'clock. My phone goes on do not disturb at 8:30, and I'm in bed because I'm waking up at 4 in the morning. So like I got to get all my hours of sleep. But how for like these young cats that are, they're on Snapchat, they're on IG, they're on TikTok, they're on, they're gaming at night. Like how are you getting them to kind of shut down at like 10 o'clock and be ready for the next day, especially out of season? Because I know in season they might be a little more in tune, with a little more focused, but out of season is just important as in season. So what are you getting them to do to kind of lock in?
Yeah, so I'd say the first thing I do is I meet with each guy at the beginning of the off season. We look at their class schedule, we look at when they have their weights, when they have their practice, and then I help them build out a schedule for every day of like, hey, like this is what your Monday should look like, this is what your Tuesday should look like, this is what your Wednesday should look like, things like that. And then right now we're kind of in the process of pricing out some things like some Aura rings, things like that, right? But that's got to be a lot between me and the player on like, how are you actually going to sleep? Because there's probably going to be a few times when you don't, right? And my first reaction can't be to like go snitch on you, right? Like we got to have a conversation. And so I think, those things are important. And then, we talk a lot about like, the education, right, on our sleep, our hygiene, all those things, right? But I think one of the biggest things that we do is we talk about is your motivation, right, when it comes to this. And I tell the guys, I'm like, yo, like this is going to directly impact how much money you can make playing basketball. And so like it's your money, it's your family, it's your career. Like I've helped out enough players where I've changed, enough players' bodies that, this is like my career is, in this, and I love you guys and I'm trying to put you guys first. But ultimately it is your career, right? When you leave here and when you go play overseas, or if you're lucky enough to play in the NBA or the G League, like it is your career, it's your money, it's your family. So like, are you going to prioritize this? Are you going to do this? Are you going to have the self-discipline to say like, my career is worth more than me being on my Snapchat at 10, 11 o'clock at night. So I tell the guys, man, at 11, just put it on airplane mode. I think that's the biggest thing. You look at some of the EMF signals that are coming off the phone, things like that. It's a really easy way to just get really quality sleep. A few of the guys have bought into it, right? Not going to reach every single player in that realm, right? I'm going to make sure every single player trains really hard, right? I'm going to make sure, when we have all of our meals together, all of our guys, eat, and that it's executed at a high level. But, some of those times when the guys aren't with me, it's a little bit of the discipline on them. So I think, that's kind of the things that we talk about is, like, hey, man, it's your career, it's your money, it's your family. So there's a part of it where you have to bring it as well.
I love putting ownership on the player. So once somebody's got to step up, lead the way, and show them this is going to actually work and do the right thing for us. How hard is it though to get hoopers? Because I think this is a huge thing to understand strength and conditioning. Because hoopers don't really, if you really look at the hoopers, they don't love to lift, right? Because football, like, yeah, they want to go throw on some heavy weight. They got some other sports in there I love it, but hoopers usually like to stay. They're slim guys, I want to be finesse, all this stuff. But how do you get them to, buy into strength and conditioning and show them that it actually helps their game?
Yeah, I would say like definitely, maybe early 2010s, that was definitely the model. I think it's kind of shifted a little bit now where these guys like understand like, the physicality that it takes. And I think, kind of getting them to buy in, we do player comps to the NBA, right? Like, all right, well, this is his height, this is his weight, this is his size. All right, man, you're 20 pounds away from this. So we got to get to that, right? From that standpoint. And then I think ultimately one of the biggest things I use for education that's really simple is the hierarchy of athletic development by Alva Meal, right? And I just kind of put it on the table and it's really simple to digest. And I'm like, all right, point to me where you're at. Like, do you think you need more work capacity? And I have it kind of broken down a little bit different with some simpler terms for the guys. So like they kind of understand like, all right, well, we got to work on our work capacity, our body composition, our mobility first. Then we can kind of get into some of that strength work and then into some, strength, speed strength. And obviously, our goal is to get more explosive, the speed element of the game. But, we have to lay this foundation first of training. So I think from a buy-in standpoint, it's like, all right, man, like, well, honestly, you tell me where you're at, right? And then like, we kind of talk about it and kind of get to a position of like, all right, so this is what June's going to look like. This is what July is going to look like, August, September. And then, we kind of lay it out. But I think, I'm fortunate enough that I just work with men's basketball here. So I have 15 guys. So I train them in really small groups. So it's about 4 players at a time. three, four players at a time. I run about three or four groups. So I am, kind of being able to be individualized in terms of my programming and things like that. But I think ultimately the guys being able to say like, all right, yeah, like I do need to, put on some size, or like, hey, man, I do need to lean up, or hey, like I am weak. I need to get stronger in these realms. And then, or, hey, like I am slow. I think like those being able to, admit those things, and then us being like, all right, well, here's our plan. This is how we're going to attack it is really huge. I think, we have a culture here where we do lift every day. And so I think, just instilling that from day one. And, coach does a great job of getting kids that are, really, you know, good kids that, lift really well and want to be coached. And I think, we got killed in the portal this past off season, but, I think,
Like everybody.
the culture that we got killed, but the culture that we have here is still really high, regardless kind of our out.
Yeah. What are some of the biggest differences between training a pro athlete compared to a collegiate athlete that you kind of see? And like, was there one that you enjoy more than the other?
Yeah, so I would say the biggest thing is like the emphasis on what the goal is, right? So like when I train a college athlete, it's always in a team setting, and our goal is for us to win collectively, right? So a lot of things about like selflessness, a lot of things on like humility, like our teamwork, our camaraderie, like a lot of like things that we'll do together, like we do our warm up together, right? Because this is about us, like together, about us competing, about how we can be the best version of a team in March, versus when I train up those our pro guys that I have, it's just me and them, and it's a very selfish training session, if that makes sense. It's about you, it's about your body, it's about how can I help you get to where you want to get with your contract and your career. So I think like that's the biggest thing is the difference of the outcome. And so, because when I do train those pro guys, it's not in a team setting. So I'm not employed by the Chicago Bulls or the Chicago Bears. I'm employed by the player. And so my goal is to give the player everything that they need to help work on their game. And so I think that's kind of the difference. And some of those pro guys I work with, I talk with their organization, and we get on the same page on like what the player needs to work on, things like that. So it's not me, just going rogue with a guy working on things that he shouldn't. But I think that's the biggest thing is what is the long term end goal emphasis, right? There's physical development in both, but then there's this aspect of like we need to perform together as a team versus, hey, like this is about you and like your personal.
There's one thing you could tell your younger self. What would it be?
I'd say, I think the way I was brought up in strength and conditioning was straight Poliquin, right? So like a straight Poliquin approach in every single thing that I did. And a lot of times when you go through that approach, everything that you learn is in a law form. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's like your external rotation needs to be 10.8% of your flat 1 RM bench press for 8 reps. Like really things like that, and like so I learned like all these like things that were in really, really strong law. And so when I would see things outside of that, especially as a younger strength coach, I'd be like, oh, that's wrong. And so I think, being open to, there's so many different ways that we can do this, so many different ways that we can increase performance. And then, understanding that there's a lot of good coaches out there that don't do anything related to that. And then, just kind of learning, is this, when I evaluate things in this field as I grow and develop, like you have to continue to grow and develop every day. You have to continue to learn because you're just going to get passed by because this field is changing so fast. But one of the biggest things is I just look at something and I'm like, is this better than what I'm currently doing? Can I implement this? Is this practical? Will this work in my setting? If the answer is yes, then I need to make the change regardless of what I've done in the past or what like a Poliquin principles book does or things like that. So I think just kind of growing with the field and understanding that what you do 20 years from now is not going to be what you're doing right now, and you should look back at your strength plan 5 years ago and be like, dang, I was so stupid because I grew and I developed and I added a lot of things, right? And so I think that those things have been huge, and then ultimately the players just always got to come first, and the program's always got to come first because there's a lot of teams out there that win games that maybe don't have the best strength and conditioning. So I think like, our development on the court and, our development in practice is the biggest thing that we can put forward each day.
What's something you'd like us to ask our next guest?
I think, just from a standpoint when it comes to, like strength and conditioning coaching, like what are we doing to separate ourselves? I think, you touched on it a little bit earlier, but we have so many strength coaches in this profession. Like we have a CSCS program here at UNC Charlotte now with the master's program. So they have 40 students in a master's program right now, working towards their CSCS. And I think what you'll see is, one of the biggest things that's going to come is how can we separate ourselves as performers, because there is so many of us, and there's 30 NBA teams, so there's X amount of NFL teams, there's 365 Division I schools, and that's it. And so I think there's going to be a finite amount of jobs in this space. So I think just coaches being able to separate themselves and be able to work harder and work smarter, I think is one of the biggest things that's going to allow this field to progress and to move to where it needs to in a lot of those ways.
Well, I was going to ask you, what are you doing to separate yourself? But it sounds like you already answered, Coach. You're doing all the little things that make you and separate you from
Yeah,
others.
I think when it comes down to kind of my role here, just working with men's basketball, just working like with one team, I have to wear like a lot of different hats, right? When it comes to like all of our performance, our recovery. So I think when it comes to what from a separation standpoint, it's okay, like, I spent $6,000 of my own money and I went to massage school from 5 to 10 p.m. for 6 months at night, every day after working a full day, right? So I could, get my massage license. And then, we're working on, things that you can do with nutrition, educating yourself in those ways, spending time on it each and every day. Right now, I'm about to take my the CPSS, the sports science certification, right? So I want to be certified in that and, make sure that I have a growing knowledge in that way. And then kind of as we go through, I'm about to get certified in cupping, things like that. So the more like kind of Swiss Army knife you can make yourself as a performance coach, right? And then ultimately it comes to like how hard you want to work. Like, writing 15 different individual workouts is hard, right? Like it's not easy. The discipline that it takes it'd be a lot easier just to train my guys as a team and us all do a really similar workout, right? The discipline when it comes to, we do blood work on all of our guys and, setting up their vitamins, words for each player individually, doing our electrolytes for each player individually based off their sweat profile. That takes a lot of time. And, there's a quicker ways to do it, but I think just having the discipline to do it every single day and to, coach your guys every single day is going to be kind of things that separate you.
Coach, I love it, man. This is awesome. It's always a pleasure to have on a former Niner or Niner himself right now. Coach, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate everything you did and dropping some knowledge for a lot of those other coaches that are in the industry or coaches that are trying to get into the industry. So thank you, man, so much. But as always, go Niners, dog.
Yes, sir. Picks up.